I'm basing this lesson over in John chapter 10, if you want to open up your Bibles there. What I've tried to do this couple, 3 days, really is what it is. It's going to feel like a week by the time I'm done. Is really, take these subjects and root them in John's gospel. And so we're trying to, kind of look at some of these different issues that our people are dealing with. And then come back, especially from John's gospel, to say there's some answers here, and so we'll have a lot of stuff out of John's gospel in the next couple of days. Meaningful life. A lot of people don't have very meaningful lives. It's not new, right? Finding a meaningful life isn't new. We're familiar with Ecclesiastes. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. When should Roy, how long would you last here if your sermon got up that morning and all you said was vanity of vanities, says the preacher? All is vanity. We're done. I think the congregation would say, we got to get somebody who gives us more hope than that, right? But that's how this book starts. The preacher says all's vanity. And then you get a little farther, verse 14. I've seen everything that's done under the sun. It's vanity striving after the wind. Boy, you want to talk about somebody that thinks about life being meaningless. There you go. And I hate to say it, at least at this point, I know I'll get to the end of the book of Ecclesiastes too, but at least at this point, when you go work through those first chapters of Ecclesiastes, it's just all doom and gloom. How do you catch the wind, right? And in some ways, Greek philosophers had it a little bit better. Plato said, man is a being in search of meaning. Well, I think that's been lived out by a lot of folks, don't you? The humans are looking for meaning. And Socrates, I really like this quote, the unexamined life isn't worth living. Right? So, you got to go and find some meaning somewhere. Maybe that's why, hopefully most of you are familiar with this reference. It's a little dated now, but maybe that's why U2's song, I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, resonated with so many people and continues to resonate with them. And, life's kind of weird like that. We've got this kind of mystery in life that we just seem to feel disjointed, unconnected, and alone. We've got more people on this planet than ever before, and yet you've got a lot of people feeling pretty alone. Isn't that amazing? And one of the curious things about serious human thought is that it tends to focus on emptiness. Because when people have satisfied those kind of basic needs like hunger and shelter, they start to become aware of a deeper hunger. And that's a hunger for something that really satisfies. And because they start to recognize that, people will try to fill that void with limited goods and partial truths. Right? And we'll try to fill that hunger for something more satisfying with achievements. Have you heard parents talk about their kids and how good they've done in school? Or how many trophies they have on the wall, right? About achievements. And that's the parent really trying to validate themselves as a parent. And we try to fill that with personal relationships. And people blow from one relationship to another because they haven't found what really satisfies there. Right? There's a deeper hunger that they're looking for. We move from one person in one place to another only long enough to discover that what we really are hoping for isn't found there, and then the quest gets renewed for fulfillment. In fact, the great certainty, it seems like, of our time seems to be that satisfaction is nowhere to be found. Oh, I hate to say that Mick had it right. There it looks like that a lot of people are saying, I can't get no satisfaction, right? There's this jarring sense that we're never quite able to make sense out of life. And some people, you know them, don't you? Seem to spend their whole lives dissatisfied in search of a purpose. Psychology Today, June this year, Neil Burton, he wrote, "What is the meaning to life?" Right? And so he wrote a little article about the question of the meaning of life. He said it's perhaps one that we'd really rather not ask. For we fear the answer or the lack thereof. And then he writes, having no purpose at all is better than having any kind of predetermined purpose. Even more traditional ones, such as to please or serve God. Whew. Really? That guy's supposed to be smart. He's a doctor guy, right? He's published. Having no purpose at all is better than to have a purpose of serving God. No wonder people are in search of meaning, right? Or Tim Bale, a professor of politics at Queen Mary's University in London, he gives this simple answer to what's the meaning of life? The meaning of life is not being dead. What? Can I sign up for a university job to teach? I think I can do this good. You all can do this good, can't we? I mean, this sounds like, you know, I'm on my music nostalgia kick in this lesson, because you know what that sounds like? That sounds like growing up listening to Kansas singing, "We're just all dust in the wind." You know, isn't it? Wow, you know. So one of my favorite authors, David Wells, he wrote this: "The sense of meaninglessness is the signature of the depleted, minimal, and postmodern self." In other words, where we find ourselves at today. Right? And Wells wrote about 5 or 6 books on this intersection between culture and theology. And that's one of the things that he had to say is where our culture has left us that we really need to deal with from a theological point of view is we've got a depleted self. I don't think I included it in here. I won't have the quote exactly right, but same book, Losing Our Virtue, he wrote that pride is getting ourselves away from God to find in self what we used to have in God. Isn't that interesting? You know, because I can go find it in myself. But see, his intake is what? You don't find it there, because self is depleted apart from God. Self is minimalized apart from God, right? And so we've got this depleted, minimalized self, you know, where people are more concerned with comfort and calories than with moral corruption and character. Right? I mean, well, maybe you do get slapped if you talk about calories to the wrong people. But man, you usually don't get in quite as big of an argument talking to people about comfort and calories as you do moral character, now do you? You know? Dissatisfaction and impatience drive people in endless pursuit of what's new and what's different. And many are confused and anxious with conflicting desires, right? And ambitions. And I think really deep down, many of us long for something that's really worthwhile. Don't we? We want to have something that really matters. Something that's life-changing. I know, I'm really feeling old with this lesson because I'm drawing all these things from, George Lucas, after the very first Star Wars came out, which was like number 4, right? An insanely popular Star Wars first movie. He got interviewed in Newsweek, and they asked him, what do you attribute the popularity of Star Wars to? And he said, people want to be involved in something bigger than themselves. I think that's the way we're created. We're created to be involved in something bigger than ourselves. And we sense that, and we seem to know that. And while many people are troubled by death, others are disturbed by a more profound kind of anxiety that we might die without having really begun to live. Because we go out there and we've got these dreams, and those dreams unravel, right? And experience in life seems to teach us that every time we long for something, we get disappointed by its outcome. I hope that's not how you feel when you're done tonight. Okay, just say it. Okay. Right? And I'll suggest then that this emptiness is pointing to something that lies beyond us and exercises a hidden, if you would, or mysterious, if you would, attraction to us. Or it's what we're all familiar with, the first part of Ecclesiastes 3, right? There's a time to this and time to that. Right after that in verse 11, He's made everything beautiful in its time. And then you have that little phrase, He's put eternity. He's put eternity into man's hearts. One finds meaning and significance in a wider and a deeper context than what ordinary life offers for us. And while I'm not a real big fan of Augustine, I do like Augustine's line here, famous line here, that, "Oh God, you've made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they find rest in you." Just put our lives feel meaningless until we find meaning in you. And he's saying that same thing, isn't he? Right? Or our pessimistic preacher at the first of the lesson, right? By the time he gets to the end of the book, he says what? The whole duty of man is to fear God, right? That's what he says, right? Keep his commandments. For this, that's your whole duty, right? He's kind of come to the end of it and said, hold it, there is something here more than just vanity of vanities and striving after the wind. It's about having a relationship with God and fearing God and doing what God says to do. And there we find meaning, and there we find our purpose. So, I told you I've tried to root this in John. So now let's deal with how this plays out in John chapter 10. Finding meaningful life. In John chapter 10 and verse 1, "Truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs in by another way, that man's a thief He's a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the gatekeeper opens. The sheep hear his voice. And he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. And when he's brought out all of his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. A stranger they won't follow. They will flee from him, for they don't know the voice of strangers. And we're probably good enough Bible students, aren't we? You know, that we've had enough Bible classes to know that, in first century Palestine, in many of the villages, there were kind of independent enclosures where several families would put their sheep in together at night, right? And they would be watched over by a watchman. But all the sheep, when they came in the morning, they know the call of the shepherd. And so when their shepherd calls them out of the sheepfold in the morning, that shepherd sheep come on out, right? And he gives a certain call, and the sheep follow him. That's what the picture of this relationship is, right? Jesus is the shepherd and his people are the sheep, and we find our way through life and we find meaning in life by following him. But did you also notice in this text that the shepherd knows all the sheep by name? He concerns himself with the welfare of his sheep. He knows his sheep in profound ways. That means he knows you and me, if we're his sheep tonight, in profound ways. He knows our past. He knows our failures. He knows our hurts. He knows our present. And he knows our unrealized longings. He even knows our idiosyncrasies. And yes, we all have them, I think, right? And he calls them by name. I wonder, if he calls his sheep by their characteristics. Okay, Grumpy, come on out. Come on, Fearful. It's time to go get to pasture, right? Or come on, Faithful. Oh, wouldn't that be neat if that was Jesus' name for you? Come on, Faithful. It's time to eat. Courageous. Encourager, right? Sleepy, you get the idea. We've got some different characteristics. I wonder if he calls us by name like that. And then you get down to verse 7, and Jesus says he nurtures his people. So Jesus again said to them, right? Truly, truly, I say to you, I'm the door of the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep don't listen to them. I'm the door, and if anyone enters by me, he will be saved and go in and out and find pasture. In a country where, you were the shepherd out in the field, you didn't have that enclosure to go to, right? You found maybe some rocks that you could put your sheep in at night. And you know what happened then? You know where the shepherd slept at night? Right there. Sheep aren't going out without the shepherd knowing it. Nobody's going in without the shepherd knowing it, right? He's the door, right? That's what he talks about. He's the door of the sheep, right? And he's there in the door to provide safety for the sheep. Right? He's there to stop predators from getting into the sheep. You see, this emphasis is on the safety and the fulfilled life of the sheep. That's what it's about. And the text says he leads the sheep in and out to find pasture. He's the one who leads the people out into the rich pasture land and brings them back in. He brings them into the enclosure at night for safety. His priority is the sheep. And that's what you hear in John 10:11. I'm the good shepherd, and the good shepherd, he does what? He lays down his life for the sheep. Or you hear it in John 10:14. I'm the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. You see, his priority is the sheep. He's wanting to make sure the sheep have a good life, that they are taken care of, that there's meaning and purpose there. You know, we live in a world where all too often nations have ended up with leaders like Stalin and Hitler, Pol Pot, Idi Amin. You know, leaders who go in and confiscate the property of the people. They steal and they butcher people. I mean, that's what their security force is actually for, isn't it? Right? In other words, they savage what's valuable from the people. Those are leaders who have only come to destroy. I'd like to be able to keep that in the realm of politics. But that happens in religion too, doesn't it? We've got radical Islamic bloodshed that we're having to deal with in this world. Not a few that have claimed Christ's name and set out to have similar bloodthirstiness happen under the banner of Christ. And need I even bring to your mind televangelists who are all about fleecing the sheep, right? And have brought, you know, have made Christianity in some places a laughingstock? Or when we've got, in the name of Christ, sinful behaviors like homosexuality being said it's okay? Those are leaders who steal and destroy, folks. They're not out there for the interest of the sheep. Right? But that's not Jesus. That's not Jesus. He's the leader who's concerned about his sheep. That's why you know this text, don't you? That's why we've got John chapter 10 and verse 10. The thief comes only to steal and to kill and destroy. But I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. Right? And it's more than just more life that he's talking about, isn't it? With this shepherd and sheep image, the abundant. If you're the sheep in this shepherd's flock, the abundant life means I'm getting to go to really good pastures, right? You know, he's making sure I'm not a thirsty sheep, right? I've got some good clean water to drink, and he's protecting me in case I'm really like an idiot, like sheep are, and go and fall into the water, and then I'd drown if my shepherd wasn't there to take care of me, right? Right? I'm well nourished, I'm trimmed, I'm looked after, I'm cared for if I'm a sheep in this shepherd's flock. But hear this with abundant life. Abundant life for the sheep does not mean to be greedy. Abundant life for the sheep does not mean selfishness. Abundant life for the sheep does not mean materialism. Abundant life for the sheep doesn't necessarily mean that the believer is happier and more content and even more materially blessed than one's non-believing neighbor is. Right? The abundant life for the sheep isn't life about self-affirmation. The abundant life for the sheep is the life that we are designed for. The abundant life for the sheep is knowing the shepherd. And we hit it last lesson, but we get, what's that life look like? We got a real brief glimpse of it back in Eden. It didn't last too long, at least as we have record of, right? It could have been a long time. It's condensed for us in about 3 chapters, right? That's all we got. We get a glimpse of it again at the end of the book in Revelation 21 and 22, don't we? That there we find ourselves in God's presence, right? That's where it ends up at. In other words, this abundant life is the life that we are created for. The abundant life is not about self-fulfillment as an end, but about personal fulfillment because of the great privilege of belonging to Jesus' flock. Right? And yet we again go out and we look for fulfillment in life and vitality in all the wrong places. Do you want another old song reference? Yeah, think Garth Brooks, right? Right? Friends in low places. Right? That accurate. But Jesus brings life, and He brings life to the full. And such a qualification defines life less as a degree of existence and more as a kind of existence. This shepherd doesn't just preserve life, He creates it afresh in unparalleled ways. Jesus gives life its meaning. Jesus is the answer to a meaningful life. And it's a life that's superior to the unbeliever's life in that it's full of hope and the blessings of God. And living the God-directed life is the way that we're supposed to do. It's like, have you ever got something, got a lot of parts? I can say this one because she's not here. Daryl, don't tell her. Don't send this to my wife. My wife will get something, and she'll try to put it together. Open all the stuff and try to put it together, and then she'll say, Mark, I need your help. And I'm thinking, couldn't I have seen this before you started? Because if you just go by the instructions, it's going to come together a whole... We've got a lot of people just trying to put life together without reading the instructions, folks. Right? And no wonder they don't find meaning. Right? There's no doubt about it. But the promise of full life, full to overflowing life, I'm telling you, is just as relevant for us today as it was when Jesus said that you can have abundant life. People in our time have discovered how unsatisfying materialism is. And they're looking for something more, something beyond that. And many thieves have told lies and have deceived the sheep, and they've stolen them, and they've left the sheep for dead. But the call today is to be Jesus' true sheep. To listen to His voice. To find Him and Him alone. That's where the overflowing life is. You see, and that means that there's no other place that one can find the God-intended life. That's why Jesus said in John 14 and verse 6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And no one comes to the Father except through me. And I realize, and you probably do too, that it doesn't always look that way to outsiders, does it? Sometimes outsiders look at the church and they see us and they don't think that's too much of an abundant life. Listen, I know that. I'm not the best example all the time. You're probably not either. But folks, we need to do the best we can by God's power, don't we? Right? And in turn, we also need to point and say, I am not the shepherd. And we need to point people to Jesus, who is the shepherd, who has the life to give. He's the source of true life that God wants all people to have. You see, Jesus is either your shepherd or he's a stranger to you. Now, you've been really good. Let me get you one more point and we'll wrap this thing down for the night, okay? What's it mean to be the shepherd's sheep? Or, whose sheep are you? How do you know whether you're Jesus' sheep or not? Well, in this text, in John chapter 10, you got to hear his voice, right? The sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. The sheep's got to recognize the voice of the shepherd. And if I don't hear Jesus' voice, I'm not his sheep. What's that say? What's that say about the importance of personal Bible study? If I don't hear his voice, I'm not his sheep. If I'm not studying my Bible, I'm not his sheep, folks. We can put on all the wool we want to, but that doesn't make us his sheep if we don't know his voice. What's that say? What's that say about the importance of assembling together? Because we think something important's happening here. That God's with his people, don't we? And when we're opening up his word and we're hearing his voice, see, it's important. And yet, I think every stat out there says what? Biblical knowledge in North America is continuing to plummet. People don't know his voice. People don't know his voice. It's an old story. I don't know whether it's a preacher story or true, but I'll tell it anyway, right? There's in Kentucky, they were in court, and you know how you put your hand on the Bible, and I swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth. Well, one day in the courtroom in Kentucky, this back, late 1800s, supposedly, they didn't have a Bible in the courtroom. What are they going to do? How are they going to make sure this guy's telling the truth? Oh, Brother Joe's over there. Brother Joe, come on up here. Witness, you put your hand on Brother Joe's head because he's as good at the Bible because he knows he's got the Bible memorized. Now again, I've heard that as a true story, whether it is or not. I do know when I went to Montana State University, just previous to my being up there, Ted Kell, who used to teach at the Sunset School preaching down in Lubbock, had come up there and done a meeting. Ted Kell had the entire New Testament memorized. And he was working on getting the Old Testament memorized. Somebody asked him in the Bozeman church, they said, Brother Kell, how'd you do that? I think he wanted to slap him. But I looked at him and said, a lot of time. A lot of time. Am I making my point? If we don't know the word, we don't hear his voice. We don't know his voice. If we want to be a sheep, the text is clear. The sheep hear Jesus' voice and they know his voice, right? That's verse 5. The stranger they won't follow. They'll flee from him. They don't know the voice of the stranger, but verse 14, I'm the good shepherd, right? And I know my own, and my own know me. And so not only do we hear the voice, we know the voice, and along with knowing the voice, we know false voices. Right? A stranger they're not going to follow. You're not telling me what God says. I'm not following that. right? That's part of what it means to be the sheep and to have abundant life, right? And then the result is what? They follow Jesus. He says they follow me, right? Verse 27, my sheep hear my voice, I know them, and they follow me. And it's by following the shepherd that we find meaningful life. Let me leave you with this. There's a story of when Israel was being occupied, or Israel occupied an Arab village near Bethlehem in the 1980s. And they were punishing the village for not paying their taxes. And so the Israeli army rounded up all the village animals and placed them in one large barbed wire pen. Later in the week, a little old lady from the village approached the Israeli commander and asked him to release her flock since the animals were her only source of livelihood. Her husband was dead. She's a widow, right? The commander pointed over to the pen full of animals and said to her humorously that it's impossible to do that because he surely couldn't find her animals. And her response was, well, Mr. Commander, if she could separate them herself, would he be willing to take them? And he agreed. So a soldier opened up the gate, and the woman's son started playing a little flute with a simple tune on it, over and over and over again. And as the boy was playing the tune, you could see in the pen every head popped up, another head popped up, another head popped up. And he kept playing the tune. And he started to walk home. And the 25 sheep from that woman's flock followed him because they knew their shepherd. Listen, if we want to be his sheep, if you want to find meaning in life, you got to be a sheep. And if you want to be a sheep, you're going to have to hear his voice, know his voice, and follow him. Amen. And so the shepherd offers his invitation tonight. That's right. And if you need to respond to the shepherd's invitation, maybe it's to become a sheep tonight. I bet we can find water somewhere around here. I don't know whether it's warm or cold, but I bet we can find water somewhere around here, and we can baptize you for the forgiveness of your sins, become one of the sheep of Jesus, and put into his flock tonight. Yes, sir. On the other hand, maybe we've been in his flock, but we're not hearing his voice very well anymore. Or maybe we're not following him very well anymore. You want meaning in life? Well, let's get back to hearing his voice and following him. So if you need to respond to the shepherd for whatever reason in a public way tonight, won't you come as together we stand and sing.
Thank you for listening to the lesson. And we hope you were blessed and challenged by the word of God. The South Edmonton Church of Christ meets at the Southwood Community Center in Millwoods, Edmonton, Canada. Our location is 1880 37th Street Northwest. Our phone contacts are, in Canada, you can call us at 780-902-1329. For those living outside of Canada, you can call us at 321-220-7519. Our meeting times on Sundays are as follows. 10 a.m. Bible class for all ages. 11 a.m. we meet for worship, to break bread, to have the communion, to remember the death of Christ. We sing, we pray, we give of our earnings as God has prospered us, and we fellowship one with another. Always remember, at the churches of Christ, a warm welcome awaits you.